beginning, and I always thought it was pretty darn flimsy.
Meanwhile, we're like moving toward war with a nuclear-armed power that we have no cause to be an enemy of. The whole thing is bizarre. And by the way, I would say to any of our viewers who don't know who you are, Michael Tracey, that you're the one thing on Twitter worth reading, I would say.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. I'm Mike.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Bobby Silverman.
Listener music this week comes to us from a listener who plays in an instrumental rock band called Bering Sea out of Seattle, Washington. This stuff absolutely rips, and there's going to be a link to it in the description of this episode. You can go check out their Bandcamp page. The track I chose from them is called Tide Rips.
Today, we've got another installment in our long-form Who the Hell Is biographical series where we take a closer look at notable online figures who are part of or adjacent to contemporary right-wing politics in the U.S. and try to explain just who the hell they are.
This is the 14th episode we've done in this series. Our previous ones have covered Stephen Miller, Stephen Crowder, Scott Adams, Bill Maher, Matt Taibbi, Laura Loomer, Charlie Kirk, Anthony Cumia, Dave Portnoy, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tim Poole, and Jack Posobiec.
That's a lot.
Ooh. You can find those if you scroll back on our feed. We love doing these episodes, but they take a tremendous amount of time to produce at the standard that we aim for. So if you appreciate what you hear today, please consider signing up for our Patreon. It's patreon.com/postingthroughit.
The subject of this episode today is a man named Michael Tracey. He calls himself a roving journalist, but he more aptly fits into a category of figures we've been calling website personalities. You could also call him a pundit, an independent pundit. Tracey's primary website is Twitter, now X, where he is just shy of having 350,000 followers.
Yeah, if you've spent any time in the political or news-oriented portions of Twitter/X, you've undoubtedly encountered Michael Tracey at some point along the way.
You might recognize Michael Tracey's longtime Twitter avatar. It's a blue version of himself, a drawn version, with headphones on, kind of beard stroking in mid-thought. For years, his profile bio read, roving journalist, friend to all dogs.
And he posts a lot. I was pretty shocked when you put the numbers together, Mike.
Yeah. Michael Tracey is approaching 150,000 posts on there since he joined in April 2009. He also doesn't really delete much, so cheers to him for the transparency. That's not true of most people when you go back and look at old tweets. So it's roughly like 24 posts a day from when he first joined the app, or 0.98 posts per hour. Those numbers are heavily skewed by what was only sporadic engagement in the first 2 years of him having the account, when he posted only scores of times in total. Starting in 2011, when Tracey started to post a little bit more, hardly where he is now, but more, he has been posting more than once per hour. Presumably, Tracey sleeps, so you can picture how frequently he uses the app during his waking hours. It feels like he's on Twitter all of the time. That's how it feels. All the time he's awake.
So for this and other reasons we'll get into soon, Michael Tracey's been a frequent subject of ridicule and mockery online. He's come up as a punchline on the left these days. But at times, he's been fairly popular with the sort of Bernie Sanders DSA wing of the left, mostly for his critiques of mainstream media and the liberal establishment. He's stood out for posting enthusiastically about both Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, later championing Tulsi Gabbard. Far-right figures have praised him for being the only honest liberal journalist. Tracey has a long lifetime professional connection with Glenn Greenwald, and various MAGA figures have boosted him when they agree with what he's saying.
So Tracey has popped up as the center of discussion a few times over the years. In September of last year, he re-entered the public discourse after a press conference held by Epstein survivors kicked him out, alleging he was being disruptive. That preceded what I guess you would describe as like a one-man media campaign led by Tracey to try to convince people that the scandal around Jeffrey Epstein, it had no real bite to it, or certainly that it was not as big as people seem to think it was. And that campaign of his has rolled on to this day. It's become a kind of his mini beat.
So critics have accused Michael Tracey without evidence of having taken money possibly from Epstein's alleged or known acquaintances, as if he would be so persistent only if he were doing a dirty job of some sort. Michael Tracey's vehemently denied this, and we have no reason to believe it's true. But it does help us understand why we're talking about Michael Tracey today. He is a figure who randomly makes the news, and very few people seem to understand just who the hell this dude is or why he's so insistent about this stuff. So joining us to try to explain who the hell Michael Tracey is, we've got Posting Through It's New York City correspondent. You know him, you love him, you've heard him on prior episodes. It's Bobby Silverman in the house, everybody.
Hi, everyone. This episode, I have to say up front, the entirety of Michael Tracey's existence and the reasons why he has, dear Lord, 350,000 Twitter followers and a pretty much a rotating guest spot on Piers Morgan's show and sitting in for Glenn Greenwald. I find it's honestly incredibly depressing in a way that, say, a Tim Pool or a Dave Portnoy or even a Jack Prilosek aren't. There's something about this that it makes me think that in a better world, it would not have come to this. For at least Michael Tracey, and definitely for all of us who are forced to live in, America in the year of our Lord 2026. But it's one of the reasons why I find him sort of fascinating. You can explain, I think, a lot of far-right figures in the way that they, peddle lies or engage in all kinds of, nonsensical arguments, is that there's a clear profit motive or a clear ideological motive. And Michael Tracey is something else, and it's something sadder. But we'll get into that soon enough.
So, Mike, why do you think Michael Tracey, from one Mike to another, is worth understanding? I mean, he comes up in the news a lot, sure, but, not to give away the episode too early, but as we were all working on this document together, what kept you going? Because these episodes take a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think the spirit of a Who the Hell Is episode is to actually explain somebody who is difficult to explain. And Tracey's persistence, his ability to survive as an independent media voice, I think is worth scrutinizing just because he keeps coming back up as a story. And I think the Epstein thing is the most recent one. And based upon his history, he will find new ways to inject himself into discourse in the future. So I think it's important to kind of lay it out. I think ideologically, he's not a right-wing person or anything like that. That doesn't mean that he's not capable. Well, or at least let's put it this way. I don't think that he's motivated by any kind of right-wing ideology. I do think that he does content that sometimes can help bolster people on the right, but it's mostly done out of complete contrarian mindset. And I think it is a story also about journalism and how fractured and broken the field is during the Trump era. And as Bob alluded to, what it's done to pretty much everybody.
So we've spent more time researching Michael Tracey's career arc than any human beings on Earth should. Today, you'll hear about his early life, his college years, his start in media, and where he's wound up today. Because we're going to try to answer the question that so many people who encounter this man on their timeline undoubtedly end up thinking to themselves, who the hell?
Who the hell?
Who the hell is Michael Tracey?
On August 8th, 1988, that dateline reads 8888. For those of you keeping score on your calendar at home, the Chicago Cubs faced off against the Philadelphia Phillies beneath stadium lights. It was the first night game ever played at Wrigley Field. But in the fourth inning, a torrential downpour cut the game short. The game was actually not officially counted because the Phillies had to get on the bus the next morning, and it hadn't stopped raining in time for them to finish the game. But on that very same day, a baby boy was born. His name was Michael Tracey.
That was great.
So Michael Tracey's 37 years old.
And he's been a Ryne Sandberg fan ever since then.
He's right around my sister's age, exactly.
Wait, he's only 37? Oh my God.
Are you telling me now for the first time?
That's new. Yeah, I'm hearing this for the first time. This is new to me.
So he's raised in West Caldwell, which is considered a suburb of Newark and New York. Some fun facts about the place we got from Wikipedia because whatever.
Don't care that much.
If you watch The Sopranos, the exterior shots of Tony Soprano's house were filmed there. So that's an interesting thing. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito was born there. Median household income data there is about $160K. Jared did this. According to the latest census data, seems like a nice place to grow up. Yeah, I've never heard anything bad about it growing up in the New York tri-state area myself. We don't know too much about Michael Tracey's childhood. That's not something he talks about much, but he has tweeted 150,000 times, and their tweets for everything.
Bob, you want to read these? I'll give you the datelines. October 14th, 2023.
I remember kids dancing in the hallways at my high school when the Iraq War started. Yes, they were just kids, so whatever. But if you don't think part of what motivates war is the sick psychic thrill lots of people get from it, you're oblivious to human nature.
Here, Mike, read this one. January 21st, 2019.
World War I was one of the biggest subjects I studied in high school, too, in European history class.
Here, Bob, you take this. February 23rd, 2017.
I remember idiot kids carving swastikas when I was in high school. It didn't justify a national political narrative.
And I'll read this. This is October 12th, 2012. I should dig up the polemic against the local police department that I wrote for my high school newspaper at age 16.
Oh, so okay, are we getting
That's
a real
fine.
sense
That's
of
a
him?
perfectly cromulent 2012 era tweet. I'm sure I've posted worse, in fairness to him.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with the tweet. I just like the way we've been able to nail down some important details about his life.
He really studied World War I. There were kids carving swastikas into shit.
But Michael Tracey was he was all cops are bastards at age 16. So, you know.
Well, he's obsessed with comparing the social behaviors of mainstream journalists to high school cliques. So obviously high school cliques may have made some more impression on him. It certainly did on me. Actually didn't know me. I was at an all boys school. So It was like, it was like that group of people wants to throw lacrosse balls at my head. These guys don't, that was my version of a clique.
Yeah, this is a theme that he has repeatedly gone back to the well on, is comparing journalists to high school cliques. Here's this June 5th, 2019 tweet. Unless you observe contemporary online media in their natural habitat, you can't fully appreciate how much of a juvenile playground mentality they have. They behave no differently than high school kids and rival cliques, constantly monitoring who's sitting at the lunch table.
So in the middle of the Bush years, he starts attending the College of New Jersey. Again, we don't know much about this period of life. He doesn't talk about it very much. February 2009, Ann Coulter, the far-right conservative pundit who had contributed, among other things, to VDARE, was signing books at an event at the College of New Jersey when a young man tried to approach her. And this was said into a local news article in NJ.com.
The police report from that night says that Tracey went onto the stage where Coulter was signing books. After being advised that the stage area was for those with books only, Tracey said he had a piece of paper and wanted an autograph. According to the report, police said Tracey then walked back towards the stage, and an officer, Detective Pat Holt, grabbed Tracey's coat in an attempt to stop him. That's an assault, clearly. Police told the Trenton Times Tracey then spun out of the coat and ran towards the seating area. After tackling Tracey, the detective attempted to handcuff Tracey, but Holt said he would not cooperate. Holt told the Times of Trenton Tracey started to scream and held on to one of the chairs in the seating area even as police were kneeling over him, one officer with his shin over Tracey's neck. Officers then handcuffed Tracey and dragged him out the door. "It's a routine arrest for us," Lieutenant Gerald Jacobs said. "Our officers made this arrest, and this gentleman has his day in court." Tracey's supporters have formed a Facebook group with more than 1,100 members, tagged college buildings with chalk, and have planned a demonstration on campus.
Wow.
Michael Tracey did nothing wrong is basically the gist of what I'm getting here for doing.
Wait. I know who you are. The specific Posting Through It listeners who have taken an edible before listening to this, that's a different Holt.
Yeah.
That was a different Holt who arrested Michael Tracey.
No relation.
No relation. Yeah. Officer Holt to comely Jared Holt. But that's, in fairness to Michael Tracey, I want to say that if you're going to bum rush, if you want to make a stunt, come up with I appreciate the effort here to beclown Ann Coulter, who is utterly vile and really an early adopter of truly far right fascist beliefs and making white nationalism and Nazism acceptable on the public stage. So I can respect wanting to disrupt this event, but rushing at her on stage, getting tackled, holding on to a chair, and turning it into a Looney Tunes cartoon, I might question his tactics, is what I'm saying here.
Well, Michael Tracey addressed this. He milked the moment, and he wrote a since-deleted blog for Daily Kos where he talked about the issue. And he says he wasn't trying to bum rush the stage. He had just asked Ann Coulter a question and was not satisfied with her answer and wanted to ask a follow-up. That article has been deleted from the Daily Kos. It's no longer on the website, but it was archived in the Wayback Machine. Here's a sample.
Lying in the grass, my handcuffs were secured, and I was then brought to my feet. As I was being escorted from the side of Kendall to the police car parked out front, the officers hurled insults at me, some very vulgar and provocative. Among the names I was called were fucking asshole, faggot, and shithead. I later asked an officer if this was appropriate language to be using while I was on the job. He said, I didn't learn it in the academy. I said, I'd hope not. To which he'd replied, I learned it from dealing with assholes like you. Those type of remarks continued for the duration of the encounter. I was thrown into the back of a police car with the handcuffs digging into my wrists. They had been put on incorrectly. One of them was twisted, squeezing both of my wrists, and resulting in some near excruciating pain at certain points. As of the next day, my hands are still irritated and bruised. I tend to think of myself as a relatively non-confrontational, fair-minded, and respectful person, and I would request that everyone give me the benefit of the doubt. Never even entered my mind to threaten Ann Coulter in any way. It is not within my nature. I'm simply a politically active individual who asked a question of Ms. Coulter, was called stupid, and sort of.
It's an amazing. This is a
okay,
10 out of 10 for this blog post. No notes.
I'm back. Everything happened so quickly. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with police officers piling on top of me. I asked that everyone supportive of me please refrain from making this into a partisan political issue. Victims of physical and verbal abuse do not know an ideology.
Okay.
They know only
all right.
that they've been wronged and degraded. I hope my conservative and Republican friends, of which I have many,
Of which there are many.
to take just as forceful a stand on this issue as would anyone of any other political persuasion. I would stress to those that are skeptical of my credibility that I have truly tried to be as objective and accurate in describing what happened as I possibly could. Oh
So-
man, that fucking.
Can
that
I add
fucking-
something here? Like, that blog post makes me root for Ann Coulter and the cops. I'm on their side now.
I don't know,
And I-
man. I'm liking the cut of this young man's jib, actually.
Oh my God. Ugh. It's annoying.
No,
Like,
I mean-
hearing him write is annoying. I'm getting annoyed listening to it.
I assume this was like one of the bigger news stories for that college for the year or so. So
Yeah. Sure was.
a fairly big, a very big event for him. I'm sure a lot of people on campus would be strongly anti-Coulter. She's the type of person who used to provoke a very polarizing response in the culture. I know Olivia Nuzzi loved her. But she's a very polarizing figure. It was a type of like pre-Trump boogeyman to bring out. So I'm sure like people were really, any college campus, there'd be a lot of tension, and he's the person who kind of sort of cashed in on it. And I'm not saying he necessarily all cynically, but it was advantageous for him in terms of getting attention to himself as a journalist, as a political activist, whatever he's defining himself here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the impression that he is hating the attention that comes from this event. He's getting some attention with the kinds of crowds that he kind of gravitates to as well. This sort of alternative left, pre-Bernie progressive movement. In the same blog post, he's like, here's the contact information for the police department and the officers. My name's Michael Tracey, if you want to mention me specifically. What's up, Facebook? I'm considering legal action. Then 2 months later, in April 2009, Michael Tracey pleaded guilty to violating a nuisance ordinance at the Ann Coulter event. He was forced to pay a $350 fine, $33 in court fees, and perform 20 hours of community service.
I mean, we're laughing at this, and I certainly am laughing at it. But I think it taught him a very, very clear lesson that for, a few bucks in legal fees and a minor hassle, suddenly there are 1,100 people in a Facebook group on his college campus praising him as some kind of hero.
No doubt.
And I think the lesson that might have imparted, it's pretty easy to indicate that it would be, if you do the right kind of stunt, it can make you popular. And maybe it might be a good idea to keep doing those kinds of stunts.
So a couple weeks later, Michael Tracey does something that would have a bigger impact on who he would become. On April 27th, 2009, Michael Tracey signs up for a little website called Twitter.com. His first post there read,
4 people are following me, and this is my first tweet, parentheses, like those memes where there's a string of dominoes and they keep getting bigger. This is the first domino. How true that is, how ahead he, to quote Nas, my man saw it like Dionne Warwick.
Now I'm all for it. My man saw it like Dionne Warwick. A wiser team for a wiser dream we could all score with. The cartel.
Tracey, a junior in college at this point, is reply guying Rachel Maddow. So that's like kind of where he's at. at that time. MSNBC had actually just launched the Rachel Maddow show. I don't know if everybody remembers this. There was, as Olbermann was in the time slot, and then she would kind of come in for Olbermann and sometimes come on as a guest, and then eventually they kind of shoehorned her into the thing after him because everybody had a sort of a relationship with her by then. And so she was becoming like a very big thing. And it was at the time that he was replying to her, I think people were starting to be, I like Rachel Maddow better than Keith Olbermann, right? Like she was starting to become like a very trendy figure. It's funny because, of course, we know that him, Taibbi, right? Like they make a lot of their career later off of, dunking on Rachel Maddow. So he seems to be a fan of the show because he often complimenting the segments and praising her for taking on conservatives. April 25th, 2010. Oh, Nate Silver is adorable on at Maddow. Neither of us are very fond of Combs. So yeah, Nate Silver, another guy who's a liberal icon at that time.
Yes, another one of our more plate of half-eaten broccoli hairstyle pundits. September 2009. Michael Tracey is now getting into journalism, and he writes his student column for The Nation, which is a progressive movement magazine and considered to be, in fact, the oldest magazine in America. And he writes about Bill Clinton endorsing same-sex marriage, marijuana legalization in California, his trip to the Rally to Restore Sanity, the Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert Can't We All Get Along festival, for those who can remember way back to 2009. And he took a bus sponsored by the Huffington Post. This was at the red-hot center of liberal discourse at the time. A few of the columns cover changes that were happening in the media landscape, and the sense that you get is that Tracey is definitely down on the state of journalism in America, and he sees it as both toothless, basically existing to back the elites and the power centers as opposed to standing up for the little guy or punching up in any way. But in a similar vein, it comes fairly clear that Michael Tracey's lodestar for this kind of work, or the work he would like to do, is Glenn Greenwald. And again, we're talking 2009 era Glenn Greenwald, which is a very different character than he is in the year of our Lord 2026. Glenn Greenwald at that point is a leftist icon, soon to be, in fact, very famous for his work on the Snowden files, but he was already considered a staunch defender of civil liberties and someone who took on government overreach. Whether he is now is a different question. But he writes about Glenn in this column from 2011 and describes him as having mercilessly dissected, quote unquote, modern journalism's, quote, disengaged, consensus affirming, status quo reinforcing tenor.
Which is, I just want to point out that there's truth to this stuff. It's not like it's, some of these criticisms are very, very true. And that's part of the reason why Glenn was able to resonate with such a large audience and to a degree why Tracey has been able to. So he showed a lot of interest in Occupy Wall Street, which is, I love whenever Occupy Wall Street comes up on one of these, because it is one of those events, Jared. We talk about like events and the way they change the trajectory of certain, of this particular strain of culture that we talk about. Occupy is one of the big ones. Unite the Right in Charlottesville is one of the big ones, January 6th. But Occupy, a lot of people who wind up either in the radical right or on the left, whatever, kind of make their way through Occupy in some capacity. And so he was very interested in it, certainly like writing about it, posting about it. One example of his approval of Occupy Wall Street or interest in it, he posted the 2011 Pulitzer Prize for overall journalistic excellence goes to Occupy Wall Street live streamers. And like, it's funny because we go, I guess, 360 there, and that's Tim Pool.
The question of Occupy is obviously its own podcast or series of books, in fact, and what went wrong and how so many people from that movement who were at the time on the left became utter fascists. And that's a longer topic, but I think what you can see is that, to speak more broadly about it, it's an incident where, for the first time, really, even before, Boys on the Boys on the Bus era blog books and all the early 2000s activism, the idea was that this new technology, the phones that we had in our hands, social media, that it was a gateway to a kind of reporting that was democratized and decentralized and really put power in the hands of the people. It turned out to be a tool to hardwire fascism into America, so we were all entirely wrong about that. But I was someone who was, in fact, excited by all of that. I mean, because at the time, I was blogging about the Knicks for free during the night.
This is Knickerblogger, right?
Yes, this is Knickerblogger era Bobby
For people who
Silverman.
don't know, we don't get sidetracked on this. I think it's come up before, but I was basically, when I was in India, I was also interested in Occupy Wall Street then, and I won't sidetrack this too much, but just to say I was reading about the Knicks game through a blog called Knickerblogger, which I did not know at the time was written by Bob Silverman, and I only found that out after we became friends through this type of investigative reporting we do.
We're talking about the ways in which Michael Tracey is offering these very sort of standard liberal progressive positions for the time, and I'm not surprised that he was drawn to Occupy, because I was too. And, like Mike said, I was writing all these posts about basketball for free at 1 a.m. After my actual job was done. And the ideas around Occupy, that if we truly democratized and decentralized the reporting process, we could inform people better, that you could really take on the power structures. And the Arab Spring happened shortly after that. And I think he wasn't wrong to be excited by that. I know I was. I mean, the idea that I could actually write about sports for a living or be a reporter was a pretty fanciful notion. But in 2011, what it showed is actually, no, you can. That the technology and the tools that were made available to people really could bring all kinds of people who would never thought of going into reporting into the journalistic process. And there was a real gateway point. I mean, the joke is that one well-timed tweet could get you a job at BuzzFeed. And that was true. There were a lot of stories that I ended up writing because I posted something. An editor DM'd me on Twitter and said, "Hey, do you want to give us 1,200 words on this?" And then I would write, 1,800 to 2,000 words, and they'd get mad at me. But the point still stands, is that there was this real sense of there are all kinds of possibilities to do different kinds of reporting, as opposed to sort of very staid view from nowhere stuff that you would read in the Times. That there was a way to do journalism that had a real voice and would be engaging and activating in a political sense. And that was the promise of Occupy. It turns out that it ended up being a gateway to supporting fascism. So we were wrong about that. But the enthusiasm at the time, I think, is very real. And it's certainly something that I felt.
So Michael Tracey, finished his time in college. And up to about 2015, he appears to be getting by on freelancing pieces for publications, places like Vice News. And none of these pieces are particularly controversial. This is the golden era of online media. It's unclear to me how he's financially supporting himself at this time. Writing freelance columns doesn't pay particularly well, and he doesn't seem to be publishing them that frequently. From what we found, there'd sometimes be months between his published works.
As time goes on, Tracey really starts to build a brand around criticizing journalists. Basically, he does media criticism. It's not a lot of anything resembling investigative reporting or even kind of your short daily news little snippets, not even really newsletter type things or anything like that. He's just focused on media criticism, and he kind of keeps track of pundits who are wrong and brings it up over and over again on Twitter. A good example, this was Jamel Bouie, who got a few things wrong for sure during the 2016 election. as a pundit. And it's not just Tracey. Like a lot of people on the DSA left were criticizing Bowie, but Tracey was one of those. He also criticized Drew McGarry of Deadspin over something, who published a take. So things like that. It would be a lot of focus on pundits, pundit disdain, pundit on pundit violence.
So he published his first article on the blogging platform Medium in 2014. But he really started using it more in 2016 ahead of the election to elaborate on his media criticism, often building out his arguments that he's having with writers from various publications on Twitter. One of his first was directed at the writer Eric Levitz and was making this argument that portraying Trump in a, quote, extreme manner, meant that the media sort of implicitly condoned extreme tactics against him and his supporters. Because logically, if Trump really is a fascist, and we think about how horrible that would be and how you would want to prevent that by any means necessary, wouldn't that mean that if they got the public on board with that idea, that would sort of create a permission structure for people to act well beyond the norms of polite society to prevent Trump from taking power? Now, he clarifies in an October 12, 2016 article on Medium that he do not support Trump. My critics, they keep saying I defend Trump. I'm carrying water for Trump. I don't support Trump. And he tries to explain why. Mike, can you read this?
Let me just briefly lay out some reasons why I do not support Trump. There are many. One is that although I think questions related to his temperament, in quotes, have been exceedingly overemphasized to the point that the election is becoming a referendum on Trump's personality, I do think his temperament is ill-suited for the job of the United States president, the most powerful position anyone in the entire world can hold. I love that.
The prose just sings, man.
Yeah.
If he's even a tad as hair-trigger and reactive in office as he's been throughout the 2016 campaign and throughout his entire life, really, then this could easily result in bad consequences. Every day could be... every day.
Okay. All right, man.
That's really funny, actually. Okay.
Yeah.
Every day could be a diplomatic crisis because he got annoyed at 2 a.m. and sent out a misspelling-ridden tweet. He's right. I mean, he is not wrong about this.
Not wrong about that, yeah.
Trump also fails at doing basic things. He often struggles to complete full thoughts and full sentences, mispronounces elementary words, and makes claims that are factually false. He does this virtually every day. With the imprimatur of the world's most powerful military behind him, these character traits could easily result in various miscues and misstatements that would end up spiraling out of control in his dealings with foreign leaders, thus resulting in bad outcomes.
Bad outcomes, man.
Such as
Okay, man.
such as war. He's not wrong. Bad outcome just happened.
I take one look at this Trump guy and I just really worry about the outcome here.
Yeah, that they could be bad.
New outcome just dropped. Iran, bad outcome for sure. Minneapolis, bad outcome. So he was right about the bad outcomes. Like I'm on the so far, man. I'm like I'm Tracey pilled, man. Yeah, fucking outcomes. I agree with him about Trump. His so-called Muslim ban and the way he articulated it when he first made his proposal in December 2015, just after the San Bernardino attacks. Well, I memory hold those, by the way. That was a long time ago. Was obviously repugnant and more than likely unconstitutional. For that to have been the centerpiece of his GOP primary campaign was a very worrying sign and negated any chance that I'd ever support him.
You mean you were debating this before then?
I know I do find that I just like it that was.
It took till December 2015 for you to land on one side of the fence or the other there, man? Really?
Let's see what the Central Park 5 guy has to say. I want to hear some more about this guy.
So you might wonder, well, why would Tracey feel the need to explain explicitly that he doesn't support Trump because of all the bad outcomes that could could result from the. I'm sorry. We said we weren't.
It's
we said-
outcome time.
We said we weren't going to make fun of him. I'm trying to. I'm
No, we're
holding.
not. We're not.
We're not.
We're with him. I think the outcomes are bad. So I'm with Tracey. So keep going.
Okay, we're Tracey pilled. Anyway, yeah. So you may be wondering, why would Michael Tracey feel like he needs to so explicitly clarify that he does not support Donald Trump's presidential campaign? And just reading between the lines, checking out some other stuff that he wrote around this time, I think it could have something to do with the specific points that he was trying to prickle mainstream media with over their coverage of Trump. At one point, he did this Medium post trying to instruct journalists on the correct way to respond to Trump tweets. This is from the end. This is from the end of that post. Bob, this is all yours.
Trump has driven most of the media absolutely insane, so I don't expect anything to change in this regard. The mass hysteria and the delusion runs deep. Trump knows just how to capitalize on it. Asking the failed pundit/media class to actually modify their behavior is just a bridge too far.
There was another one he did titled Things That Are Important versus Things That Are Not Important. And this was also like a guide for journalists, ostensibly. Most of the negative is not directed necessarily to journalists as much as what he calls woke Twitter. Mike, can you give us some samples of what Michael Tracey thinks is unimportant?
Yeah,
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
The real stories, the real journalism is what's important. Here's what's not important. Monitoring Twitter to ensure that the people use the correct lingo. Furiously denouncing people who use the incorrect lingo. Sorry. Thinking that because your extremely rarefied in-group has deemed certain lingo correct and certain lingo incorrect, that you are unassailably and eternally right, and that you cannot be challenged on these conclusions even by good faith interlocutors.
Interlocutors? Damn, dude.
Damn, son. Where'd you find this?
Michael Tracey, give your thesaurus a break, dog.
Arbitrarily capitalizing certain words on Twitter. I mean, okay, I'll leave a comment for the end. Sorry, but I'm smiling.
Keep going.
Arbitrarily capitalizing certain words on Twitter and taking this to be indicative of genuine political commitments. Thinking that because your in-group plays an outsized role in setting the terms of Twitter-based discourse, you are somehow persuading people outside your in-group to support your preferred policy positions. You are not. Staying cocooned in your esoteric, jargon-laden in-group and assuming that doing this can meaningfully affect political change. It cannot. He's so fucking online. So fucking online. And it's like he's looking at his Twitter feed and he's like, no, garbage.
Naughty.
Stop it, you fucker. Stop capitalizing these words. It's like he's just getting pissed off.
This is not important.
This is give me only the important shit.
You know, the great thing is that all the really smart people on Twitter at the time would be posting very long threaded tweets with detailed information and then occasionally throw in stuff like, my dog is a chunky boy. Those are the people that I liked following on Twitter at that era. I also think you can boil Michael Tracey's media criticism down to people should stop disliking and or criticizing Michael Tracey.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think also he has a strong resentment for what he perceives to be
the cool kids.
He looks at what he thinks is like the liberal media thing, and that is the justification. You know, that supposed power that they all have is the justification for his resentment, which is so palpable in this thing. You can imagine him looking at the tweets of other people and just getting pissed off so much that it drove him to write on Medium.
So Tracey doesn't support Trump. He's made that explicitly clear. But he also thinks the way the media treats Trump is way out of line. and he thinks that the media's lost on all this woke bullshit. He's also grinding against Hillary Clinton fairly hard. He published on November 7th, 2016, that he felt voting for her was morally untenable. It's criticisms of Democratic Party leadership and mainstream media reactions to Trump, like those, that ended up getting him some wider media attention, both in lefty online spaces, sort of the Bernie crowd that also was not a fan of Hillary, that also had problems with how the media covered politics, but also with pro-Trump conservatives, right? This was a lot of the same criticisms they were trying to channel in their messaging when defending Trump against scandals in the media or criticism from his opponents. That year, he appeared on Fox and Friends, the morning show of Fox News, where he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, who was still a very prominent cable news figure, but not quite what he would go on to become yet.
What's amazing is that Hillary Clinton has the unprecedented advantage of virtually the entire elite media being united against her opponent.
Yes.
And even that being the case, she and her surrogates still go out of their way to whine and complain and whinge at the press whenever they exhibit the slightest hint of scrutiny of her record. So the email scandal is routinely dismissed by liberal pundits, but anybody who has a basic journalistic impulse would have led with that as the main issue at the forum this past week. But even Matt Lauer doing that, it's really a simple journalistic act, earned him the just total ire of the media establishment, and they have no self-awareness of that fact.
So why is that, though? They're liberal, but they've always been liberal. There's something more going on here. They feel threatened by Trump in a way I don't think any candidate has threatened them.
Right. I think a good way to think about it is, let's say Ted Cruz theoretically had been nominated.
Right.
They would have been united against him, basically, as well. But I don't think their contempt would have been as visceral for Ted Cruz. Because Ted Cruz is not as proximate to them. Donald Trump came up in elite media spheres. He was a reality TV show host. He was, paid by NBC Universal. So I think that there's this sense within the elite liberal stratum that they, maybe bear some culpability for Trump in a way?
Maybe that. So here's an amazing example. The Washington Post has disgraced itself, I think.
Bob's making a face.
That's not where I thought he was going with that. That really isn't what I thought his answer was going to be. And that's a incredible bit of contrarianism, just to give him a little bit more credit. His answer wasn't that, well, the liberals, have this visceral hatred for Trump because he's seen as beneath them, or, he's just a reality TV star. He hasn't achieved any real elite credentials by, spending a lifetime in politics that one needs before one can throw their hat into the political arena. Like, that would be the standard explanation for that. His answer is even a contrarian's contrarian answer. He decides that the reasons the liberals don't like Trump is because he's one of us, and therefore it's our, that is a wild contrarian take, and I kind of have to hand it to him.
And it also seems like something that would play well to a Fox audience.
Yes, absolutely. The other thing I think is absolutely amazing about Tracey is that he's so desperate to be a 2016 Bernie bro, except those people don't like him either.
Right.
That's the problem. He would have been a really, you pick your most annoying, I can't remember any of those figures anymore, but pick your favorite, circa 2016, Max Blumenthal level tanky, who was just driving you crazy. Michael Tracey could have been that, but they didn't like him either.
So in 2016, Tracey used GoFundMe to raise money to cover the 2016 campaign. On the fundraising page, he wrote that he'd like to spend the final 2 weeks on the road, talking to voters in some of the electorally pivotal areas rather than stay ensconced in my elite coastal enclave. He raised a bit over $17,000. That's a nice chunk of change to go reporting.
Yeah.
I definitely saw when I went through his 2016 period and kind of came through it. I saw a lot of stuff that was on the road. I'm speaking to this person here, someone in a diner or this, that, or the other thing. But as far as we know, there's no like reporting projects that we can really. You didn't find anything, right? I didn't see any.
I would also like to note the kind of sort of smug superiority about him needing this money to escape his elite liberal bubble when all that reporters were doing in the summer of 2016, even the spring of 2016, and definitely into the fall of 2016, was going on Cletus safaris to ask Trump voters specifically.
Cletus safaris.
You never heard that term?
No, no, but it's so good. Yeah.
Okay. The term of art, Cletus safari, is when, say, a noble institution like the New York Times or the Washington Post or whomever sends some Ivy League grad to go rub elbows in a diner in a flyover state and find out what the common man really thinks about the issues surrounding the election.
How many of y'all like Cletus safaris?
Because that was everywhere.
No, I remember it was like a thing. In October 2016, Tracey popped off like this one tweet that went really viral. And I mean, I think it was like, thousands of retweets and thousands of likes, which is a lot back then. The site, of course, grew from 2016. And he pinned it to his profile. And the post, Jared, fairly straightforward.
Treating voters like misbehaving school children rather than rational actors. Probably the least effective persuasion tactic of all time.
Not wrong.
Again, yeah, these things did need to be said about Hillary at that time. So I assume that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about Trump. This kind of common sense thing, because you could see, the Clinton campaign, the missteps were so obvious if you would just look. If you were not completely up the ass of the Democratic Party, you could see the struggles of that campaign very clearly.
It was so condescending. It was like, what do you mean you don't want to vote for us? Against this guy?
Don't you know that they're wrong, and that if you vote for them, you're wrong too? Wouldn't you rather be right? We're right. I mean, I distinctly remember being in the I was on staff at Vocative at the time, RIP though, and we were all sort of gathered around the TV, the TVs that they had in the newsroom, watching Hillary give the deplorable speech. The one that's for those who were not around at the time. This was a speech where Hillary said very clearly, started weighing in on the alt-right and talking about the real fervor among white nationalists and other extremists for the Trump campaign.
I want to just interject a memory, which is, while she's giving the speech, they had some troll in the audience to almost emphasize. That's when I knew it was curtains. Yeah. That's when I knew it was a scary time for democracy. No. But I mean, literally though, the point is that like she's talking and then all of a sudden somebody yells, Pepe.
We were just, myself and the other members of the sports and culture vertical at Vocative were just sort of shaking our heads going, no, this is bad. Don't do this. You're doing this wrong. Stop. Whoever told you to do this, fire them. This is going to backfire spectacularly. And within days, it seemed, they were reclaiming the term deplorables and putting out freaking Expendables knockoff T-shirts with pictures of like Milo Yiannopoulos and Roger Stone and people and Alex Jones as leading the deplorables into battle.
Oh, they were part of, I know the image well, but it was a Pepe himself geared up and like with like all kinds of weaponry leading the charge.
Yeah, it was, I was just remember sitting there like shaking my head going, no, wrong, bad. This is going to lead to bad outcomes, is what I thought to myself.
Yeah, that's why I didn't support it. So I put a note here in the document just for us to kind of stop and reflect. This is about the midway point on his career arc, more or less. The Michael Tracey that makes so many people's skin crawl, I feel like I haven't got a real good glimpse of him yet, right? I mean, he's certainly, like, in my opinion, like, annoying as a media critic. I mean, the general points he's making aren't necessarily wrong. In fact, some of them I would agree with, but the way he's going about it is like as annoying as you possibly could.
There's something about the way he posts and the way he writes on Medium and the brief interview snippets that we've heard that I just want to sort of grab him by the collar and shake him until he stops. It's profoundly annoying in a way that I can't really say exactly why, but just his tweets make me mad at him.
Well, I mean, because he's button mashing. I mean, that's my only. He's just button mashing. Like he wakes up in the morning and he's about this. Other people might be like, I need about like 3 hours to do this. He's on Twitter the whole time, it feels like, and he's basing a lot of the sort of the foundation for his media personality. I don't really think he's a journalist, or he's certainly not like a conventional reporter or an investigative reporter in any way. But I mean, the foundations for his persona are found in what to me seems like the anger he feels for the people he sees on Twitter. Like he's seeing them, they're annoying him. Everybody's annoying on Twitter, right? Like, I think that's
I'm annoying on Twitter.
Yeah, of course. I'm annoyed with myself.
My posts are very bad.
Yeah, so everybody's annoying, and he's getting. This is the way my read on it. He's getting like really, really annoyed by people, some of whom may genuinely be very annoying, and it is forming this foundation for him, just where he's going to get angry about every trending story and have a take that he wants to, fight back against these perceived enemies.
So Trump won the 2016 election, and Michael Tracey rising a bit at this time, getting some attention, getting those, getting the right columns for places like the Daily Beast, the occasional viral posts and that sort of thing. He continued on this track of railing against mainstream pundits who got the 2016 election all wrong. And he had a lot to work with. There were plenty of pundits who completely miscalled how that election was going to go. In one piece, he wrote that the cult of fact-checking Trump is part of what enabled him to win. And I just want to point out, this is one of his hobby horses that he still spends time on occasionally today, and it's why he hates people like us, specifically, right? People who've reported on extremism or done these investigative pieces pushing back against people who spout out misinformation or just like bullshit in a plainer term. He views us as part of the problem and has since 2016. He starts taking aim at media personalities in a safe, self-labeled, quote, pundit accountability initiative.
Fake journalists screaming fact check, 5 exclamation points, now want to be in charge of purging fake news. Bunch of losers.
And through this time, he goes back to like a lot of the same themes. The media was hysterical about Trump. They overreacted to his candidacy. They overhyped the threat that Trump posed to the country. And together, that sort of misguided overextension is what helped Trump cross the victory line. He also pushed back against the Clinton campaign's initial post-election messaging, saying, there was Russian meddling. We got to look into that. Something about this stinks. And he's basically full-time blogging at this point. He's inviting his readers to support him financially on Medium. He's publishing a new article every couple days. He's really making a run for it at this time.
On December 30th, he published a blog on Medium predicting that the Trump era was going to be, quote, a constant lurching from ginned-up crisis to ginned-up crisis. The real crises, and there will be many, are sure to get drowned out and ignored because all energy will be consumed by the phony, ginned-up crises, which can evidently be prompted by a mere tweet. Trump has a capacity to launch the entire U.S. media into an instantaneous frenzy whenever he wants, simply by tweeting something trollish, incendiary, or weird. And the media has shown absolutely no ability to treat his tweets with any circumspection. Instead, they eagerly feed into the frenzy, partly because it's good for clicks, ratings, and partly because they lack the analytical acumen to do anything but. It's perhaps time to accept that the media will simply be incorrigible in this regard and figure out what to do, knowing that their constant crisis lurching mode will be our, quote, new normal. What I think is interesting about that, actually, there is a lot of truth in it, in the sense that Trump and MAGA have been very effective at creating kind of fake scandals and crises for people to follow and distracting people. They've been very successful with that, or just sort of the Steve Bannon model of just throwing a whole bunch of shit at the wall and making it impossible for people to cover everything. That is true, but it also papers over. It sets a standard that, like, anything that anybody says about Trump or anything anybody says about, creeping authoritarianism or whatever, that part of it, that's sure to be bullshit too. And I think that sums up a lot of the way he covered the rest of Trump's time.
Yeah, I also think it's worth noting that everything we've heard from Michael Tracey so far are what shouldn't happen. Journalists should not overreact to Trump's tweets. People should not get in hysterics about the presence of the far right. He's very, very got a clear agenda of what people shouldn't do, which is all well and good. There is a place for saying, like, for legitimate media criticism. But if Michael Tracey's goal is to actually, for someone who says all of this is unimportant, you think eventually he would get to the point of saying, and here is what is important, and I'm going to go report this out and tell you about it. But that really never happens. And it's very easy to take a position that everyone else is a hysteric or in the midst of a moral panic, a la, the satanic panic, if you never actually get around to saying what are the real things that people should be focusing on and focus on them.
It's funny that you mention that, because I think in the article in which he says what is not important, and we covered that. I think one of the things that was important, I believe was Flint. I believe he talked about what had happened in Flint. And, yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Stuff like that is important, but he's not really interested, it doesn't seem, in doing the type of reporting that finds, let's say, environmental crises or things that expose the horrors of poverty or whatever. He is focused on the pundits all the time.
Yeah, if you think that the water crisis in Flint is important and should be reported, well, then take that $17,000 that you raised, and I guarantee that even in the great state of New Jersey, you can find a township whose water is being befouled by greedy developers. Go report that, man. You can even do that in your elitist East Coast liberal enclave. I swear to God.
On January 20th, 2017, the day of Trump's first inauguration, the lefty alternative media outlet The Young Turks announced that it had hired Michael Tracey as an investigative reporter. He was part of a cohort of 4 hires that was off the back of a crowdfunding campaign. Other hires at this time included Nomiki Konst, and as commentators, Ryan Grimm and Sean King.
Sean King. I don't think Sean King has come up on this podcast yet.
That is a nightmare blunt rotation of new staffers.
Nightmare blunt rotation at the Young Turks. Michael Tracey's there. As far as I can tell, this was his first full-time journalism job. Like, he had been blogging. He would, contribute pieces to publications, but as far as I know, this is the first time where it's like, all right, every day I wake up and I got this job specifically. And Tracey, having had blogging, having had been, a little thorn in the side media critic, wrote that he was cautious of the job. He worried it would jeopardize his editorial independence. And he also acknowledged that the Young Turks, that's a progressive outlet. And he wrote this.
Progressive would probably not be my go-to word to describe my own political orientation. But I certainly support numerous progressive positions and largely take a progressive view of social/cultural issues. In general, I tend to think that the flaunting of labels is not particularly worthwhile and confers no utility. It allows people to pigeonhole you and serves no commensurate advantageous function. I think of myself foremost as a journalist and a critic. People are free to assign whatever ideological characterization they wish. I've always been upfront about the candidates I've voted for and so forth. Transparency is usually the best policy. My God, I just want to
he
drape his
writes a lot
prose
about
and-
himself.
Oh boy,
I mean,
if you
it's
took
like,
the word
who
"I"
fucking
out
cares,
of
dude? Who fucking cares? I've never felt like, I'm just as an aside here, I've never felt like being like, hey, I know what you're all thinking about my fucking idea. I mean, really, like,
no, it's so plummy. It's like he wants to, it's like he sees himself ensconced in a smoking jacket in a well-appointed library with leather-bound books surrounding him at all times, and he's drawing on a fricking meerschaum pipe or something. Like, get over yourself, man. You can say it. Here, I'll edit you, Michael Tracey. Here's my edit. I've done a lot of punditry, and I've written op-eds that had a very clear, distinct political viewpoint. But when I'm doing investigative reporting, that's the first and the sole goal. Done.
thank you.
Well, I found on Facebook a little sizzle reel the Young Turks put together for Michael Tracey shortly after his
nice.
hire.
Yeah, well done.
So I'm interrupting this podcast to inject some vintage Michael Tracey.
About elite media is that it's concentrated overwhelmingly in a few locales. And the people who predominate those
I just want to say before I let this play out, it sounds like a Coldplay track in the back. I know it's not.
It's so perfect.
It's just generic.
Did this mother scratcher say predominate?
media circles tend to all know one another. They tend to crave one another's affirmation. They tend to be in the same sort of social networks. I think that leads to a general obliviousness and a susceptibility to excuse the failures of their colleagues and their friends. What you saw in the aftermath of the election was this move to blame the voters. I think that primarily the culpability lies with people who set the terms of the overall discussion, and those people are relatively affluent residents of New York City and Washington, D.C. They're so disconnected from average people on a regular basis. That's why I think the Young Turks is a great corrective, potentially.
So the blame for the 2016 election is journalists, very wealthy journalists in New York, Washington, and LA.
And again, he's not actually talking about, he's not talking about the reporting. If he's talking about blogging and people making, calling Trump marmalade face or something like that, which I believe I may have done myself, I get it. It's annoying. But the media as a whole, the idea that it was this monolith screaming about how Trump is Orange Hitler, I'm sorry. If you go to the most read publications and you go to the most popular, if you go to the things that people were paying attention to, cable news, the New York Times, the tabloids and their local paper, people were bending over backwards to try to understand the Trump voter. And there's a condescension in that too. But it would, what he's talking about when he's talking about this endless stream of smug condescension, which, let's talk about smug condescension, Michael Tracey. If you're talking about that, he just means tweets. He means the things that he sees on Twitter all day. That's what is still pissing him off.
that is an emerging theme here.
I also just want to break in here. He's hired as an investigative reporter at the Young Turks. From what I can tell of his output for the Young Turks, it was mostly columns.
And man on the street.
Man
TVs,
on the street interviews and stuff.
Him under the, sweating under the sun, holding a microphone out, trying to talk to some passerby. That is my mental image of him.
like it's a lot of these like very voicey kind of column type things, and there is some stuff. I mean, you could call the man on the street stuff reporting. I wouldn't call it investigative reporting. You know,
Yeah,
he'll
content.
He's
He's
in
making some content. We're making content right now.
You know, he'll get in politicians' faces and ask them hard questions and stuff. There's some value to that, but I don't know that I would call it investigative reporting.
That's a good point. But he, you know, as I was saying, his time is short-lived but eventful. 1 month into the job, he drew some backlash after writing a piece declaring that anti-Semitism was not a big enough problem in America to warrant the media's bizarre new obsession with reports stating that it was rising in the U.S. And then he said this.
Yes, there are newly visible anti-Semitic Twitter trolls who have been stupidly given a platform by journalists desperate for something to report on. But in general, anti-Semitism remains a highly marginal force in American life. Where it does exist, it should no doubt be combated. But inflating the threat doesn't do anyone good. If it turns out and is empirically demonstrated that anti-Semitism really is on the rise in the U.S., is that a cause for concern? Of course. But no such thing has been demonstrated, notwithstanding a handful of contemptible and wrong bomb threats.
Yes, notwithstanding the bomb
threats.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the bomb threats. I just want to say that if you want to get into, Tracey wants to hold like, you know, show trials for accountability for pundits, right? Where it's like fucking Ross Duhat comes out in fucking chains, and it's like, sir, you, you know, it's like fucking Bane, and he's like, Mr. Duhat, you know.
7 months after the publication of this story, Unite the Right happened. Some Nazis showed up in Charlottesville chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and then killed a woman.
Now, if Tracey is listening to this and punching back in his head, that he's saying like, oh, well, it still wasn't a big deal, even with the Jews will not replace us thing, even if in his mind that's the case. Well, what happened? What happened after that? We had Bowers in Pittsburgh, right? And then another anti-Semitic attack that was foiled, that was similar in a synagogue in California in April 2019. I can't remember where it was. So the point is, and then now we have what? We have this insane split. And so what I think is really funny, I mentioned to both of you separately, is that like his big thing now is like the Epstein. People are talking about Epstein too much. Like one of the biggest things people go off about, like in their imagination on Epstein, is his relationship to Israel and his relationship to Zionist occupied government, like the conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. If there's anything about Epstein that it's overblown, maybe it's some of that. And it's funny because it's actually a symptom of exploding anti-Semitism.
The Epstein, for people on the left broadly, the importance of the Epstein case is elite impunity. That's why it's an important story. It's a story about the fact that people of wealth and power worked to protect certainly the most notorious pedophile of the last 100 years.
I think Tracey's take on anti-Semitism here has been proven horribly wrong. And I know he's an outspoken critic of Israel, and I obviously share those criticisms.
Not for the same reasons. I mean, again, why is the right obsessed with Epstein? It's because they think, oh, well, here's the Jewish demon at the center of a network of, that are secretly controlling the world. It's the Zog stuff. It's explicitly Nazi and white nationalist rhetoric surrounding Jews. That's why they all care about it. It's not because they think that, well, we need to dismantle these systems of power that protected someone who was self-evident, that was guilty of heinous crimes. It's that, oh, you see, there's the head Jew, and there are all these other Jews that are doing it too. That's why they care. For Michael Tracey, though, not particularly relevant, as we'll see.
So at the Young Turks, he's collaborating. He's doing shows with Jimmy Dore, which is key because he becomes another player in this space that overlaps right and left. He criticized Bernie Sanders once for portraying Israel as a victim of scapegoating. I thought he had, his instincts seemed good there. He got into it with Jeet Heer. I'm just following some of his posts about Trump's fascist impulses. He cited a Corey Robin piece minimizing concerns about Trump's authoritarian tendencies. I think that's sort of been proven wrong. That's my opinion over the last 10 years or so. Like one of those things where the points looked reasonable at the time, but it missed the overall thing that Trump's critics were really picking up on at the time, which is just just his seeming overwhelming attraction through his words for authoritarianism. You could just feel it in everything he said and the way he said things.
But Tracey's real viral moment at the Young Turks came after he went ding ding fisticuffs in a confrontational interview with Representative Maxine Waters of the great state of California at the March for Truth in Los Angeles. The date was Saturday, June 3rd, 2017.
Up until the Epstein shtick, this really was, I think, Tracey's main story. It was the thing that reached the most amount of people. It was the thing that everybody knew about him, that he had some kind of dust up with Maxine Waters. And, I would guess that he learned something from this, from the negative attention he got from this incident as a way of perpetuating interest in him and driving engagement.
Before we talk about what actually happened, I just want to note that at this time, Maxine Waters was 78 years old. And Maxine Waters is a small woman, 100 pounds wet.
She's a straw weight, fight fans.
This is like getting in a fight with the Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, so the way this happens is he basically lets people know. He wants to hype up his work that he did around this and his latest journalism endeavor. He's got a cameraman for Young Turks. He's asking people questions there, and he says, Maxine Waters just shoved me and angrily stormed off as I asked her a question. Not a violent shove, but she initiated physical contact. So this is an early afternoon Pacific time. And then he says, you can watch for yourself shortly. The questions were reasonable, extremely suspect for a member of Congress to shove anybody. It wasn't an assault by any stretch, but there's no justification for escalating physical contact like that. So interest in this grew, right, until people saw the video.
Should it be overwhelmingly on this Russia matter?
Well, no, and this is it. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And for people who say, don't do this, you just should do that. Let me just say that I consider that protection of our democracy and understanding that Russia is not our friend and that they are undermining our democracy by hacking into our elections and trying to determine, as they have done, who should be president of the United States, and that's very important. At the same time, we fight very hard for health care. We're trying to preserve the ACA while they're trying to undo it with Trump care that's going to throw 34 million people out of health care. And so we know how to do both, and we're doing that.
When you say Russia's not our friend, was Obama mistaken to forge military cooperation with Russia in Syria and to try to get a START treaty?
Look, you and I have a different agenda, young man. I'm out to impeach this president. Get that straight. I'm out to impeach the president. I'm not going to be diverted by people who are Obama haters.
Do you think...
There you go.
Okay, there you go.
I always laugh aside, after I've been attacked.
It's okay. I'm getting in the way of progress. I thought I asked fair questions.
Man, that's classic.
So he's like, she's escalated physical contact. But after it happened on video, he laughs and is like, oh yeah, she pushed me out of the way a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he posted that she exhibited erratic, intemperate behavior, and that post got ratioed very, very badly on Twitter. Facing mockery, Tracey doubled down. He gave his full statement.
Yeah, I got this. I've interviewed many members of Congress. Was never once have any of them initiated unwarranted physical contact. Maxine Waters did just that today. After asking her 2 questions at a public event, the quote-unquote March for Truth in Los Angeles, she became agitated, stormed off, and shoved my arm.
Why did he put
Besides,
that in quotes for himself?
I don't know. I don't know.
Dude is legit very funny.
Okay. As I explicitly state in my initial tweet reporting the incident, I didn't perceive the action to be excessively violent. The words push or swat would also be apt descriptors. Anything that connotes unwarranted physical contact. I wasn't meaningfully impeding her path. There was no reason for the contact. My camera person observed the incident and immediately identified it as a shove or push. The semantics are immaterial here, as it obviously doesn't rise to the level of an assault or anything remotely criminal. It just shows Waters to be erratic, intemperate, and unprofessional. I had an entirely uneventful interview with Rep. Brad Sherman just moments before.
I mean,
I want to point something out here, which is kind of amazing, which is that if you watch the video, and please indulge yourselves, friends, she gave him a perfectly reasonable answer. And when he asked to follow up, she gave a perfectly reasonable answer to that. And his response was to ask a very, very silly, whataboutist gotcha question about working with Russia on Syria, which is just, it's trollish behavior. And Maxine Waters recognizes fairly early on, yeah, you're not really asking questions. You're just being a troll. You're not actually interested. Maxine Waters saying they hacked our election, which was very much a term that got used a lot of the time and is a very, very lousy descriptor for what happened. You want to pick at that? Have at it. You want to talk about the actual influence campaign and the scope it had compared to the efforts of actual, homebrewed American influence campaigns? Have at it. But man, she answered your question. And leaving aside you describing this literal 100-pound senior citizen brushing past you slightly as she just got tired of your bullshit, it's laughable. And more than that, it's like, buddy, you did a lousy job with that interview. She's right to ignore you. And if she'd keeled off and smacked you, well, I would have said that was untoward or something like that. But honestly, that's what you deserved, man. Shut the fuck up.
So next year, not related, I assume, to...
No, not related.
Maxine Waters. Tracey parts ways with the Young Turks. Programming note, I've departed the Young Turks. It was an interesting experience. Other things are in the works, but I'm always open to suggestions. Get in touch.
So after leaving the Young Turks, Michael Tracey leaned harder into Russiagate skepticism, which was all the rage at the time. The Mueller report was on its way. And he went back to his media criticism and commentary path. He's getting lots of attention again, notably from conservative media. And the sort of post-left spaces, I think that's what it was kind of calling itself for a while. Basically, like a subset of, online universes that rallied behind Bernie Sanders and just got totally burnt out and cynical after the 2016 election. He starts getting some pickup there, too, for his criticism, which, in their eyes gives voice to a lot of the frustrations they have, sometimes rightfully.
Well, his sympathies for liberals and progressives, that if they were ever there, start burning off in noticeable ways. With one exception, he becomes infatuated with the political possibilities around one Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, who ran the Democratic primary in 2020 and then would later go on to be the director of national intelligence in the Trump administration until resigning recently.
Yeah, so it's not to say that Tracey loves Trump or even that he starts becoming overtly right-wing in any way. But whatever hesitations he had to engage with right-wing movements is apparently overridden by the contempt he feels for journalists and what he perceives as liberal mainstream. I should note here that it is around this time that I started to just see Tracey more and more. And it was usually because far right figures were propping him up as a truth teller and propping him up as like one of the real journalists. You know, one person I remember about specifically saying that was one Eric Stryker, real name Joe Jordan, a neo-Nazi little Goomba who had bounced around between the Right Stuff Network and I think he was traditional worker. He was at Traditionalist Workers Party, Daily Stormer. He was around every possible neo-Nazi group that existed for a while. And I remember him saying, very vividly saying like Michael Tracey is the only real journalist left, that type of thing. So yeah, he's making more regular appearances in right-wing media to air out criticisms, and he's seemingly aware of how this looks to some of his audience as he takes some time to explain why he's doing Fox News.
So I'm happy to explain my reasoning for going on Fox. I don't think it's that complicated. If I'm asked to give my honest views, I will do so on virtually any forum which offers it. I've never been told what to say on Fox. That's just not how it works, at least in my experience. What happens is you get contacted by somebody associated with the show, want you to speak on a certain topic, and then you do it. I could, do cartwheels or wear my underwear on my head on Fox, and there would be no restrictions.
I think there might be a restriction.
He should fucking do that.
There's not nearly enough gymnastics on Fox these days.
He also is kind of glazing over, the classic Noam Chomsky bit of like, you don't get booked on Fox because they expect you to say an exact script. But if you believed something else, you would not be booked on Fox. You're there to reinforce the line.
You're there to be their pet lefty apostate. It's different than when they bring on an Alan Colmes type or a hapless liberal to dunk on them. He's there to say is to convince them that, like, see, one, we're open-minded enough to talk to people on the other side of the political spectrum, and two, when we talk to the real journalists, they agree with us. It's very convenient that way.
So it's kind of in this period, circa 2019 is where we're at on the timeline. The axe that Tracey has been grinding against journalism is fully hardened at this point. I found a Ask Me Anything thread he did on a subreddit called Stupid Poll, which...
Oh my God, I fucking remember this. I remember Stupid Poll. This is like a Red Scare kind of... Is it a Dime Square type bullshit?
Yeah, like Red Scare adjacent. It's like, I am have lefty aesthetics, but I use slurs.
Right.
Political crowd.
And I will always say this when it comes up. It's like the whole thing of like, oh, Brooklyn, you're in Brooklyn and you're being some sort of right wing edgelord from like a left wing. That's been going on since like the 90s, right? I mean, like, is that correct?
Look, kids went to see Screwdriver play. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah.
Anyway, okay, Stupid Paul.
Yeah, so he said this about how he considers himself in relationship to journalism.
I am so disgusted with journalists and the media more broadly that I refrain from even conceptualizing myself as part of some social class as them.
His connection to other figures who took similar paths, like Glenn Greenwald, who he's long idolized, people like Matt Taibbi, also seems to strengthen in this period. And as the crazy year that was 2020 gets rolling, the portrait of the Michael Tracey we see today starts coming into clearer focus. That year, Tracey wrote about the protests and riots following the police killing of George Floyd. But his angle was like, the mainstream media is all on board with this Black Lives Matter stuff, and they're ignoring the chaos and destruction this has wreaked across so many communities in the U.S. The businesses are boarded up. They're scared. The riots are destroying this place.
Yeah, that it's also that it's adversely impacting Black businesses, right?
Yeah.
The ultimate hypocrisy. And some of this is, of course, true.
I think he did do some traveling at that point and going, I think
Yeah,
he
he
was
was.
in Minneapolis, like actually trying to do shoe leather reporting. I don't know if I ever saw the results of it on either his Substack page or his Medium page, but he was sort of
he was
wandering
posting
around.
He was posting things, and on both on Twitter and on his side sites.
So then 2020, it's another election year, and the run up to that, he's getting booked on TV a little bit more to talk about the presidential election, to talk about COVID era politics. He also starts writing for conservative publications a little more often, like a British site called Unheard.
Is Unheard like a turf website? I just assume it's a turf website.
It's generally considered like
Catherine D is written for that one.
Like right of center. It's like kind of reactionary conservative.
Gotcha.
To me, I look at the website and the vibe I get. I haven't read enough stuff on the site to know if this is totally true, but the vibe I get is like it's the British equivalent of Barry Weiss's Free Press.
Yeah,
okay.
It's very free press coded, or
so
it's a site
not that
where
far
people
off to call it a turf website. Okay,
yeah, it's a place where you can't talk about Amber Heard at all ever.
Yes.
It's completely on Amber Heard. Is the website.
He even gets a byline in the Wall Street Journal in 2020, and he uses it to criticize Kamala Harris for not speaking harshly enough about those goddamn anarchists rioting in the street in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the Trump administration's response to those anarchists was to drag people off the street into vans. It was really foreshadowed a lot of the horrors we've seen on the streets of places like Chicago and Minneapolis.
That was when the Julio Rosas of the world were being sent out to do all of there was a huge desire for videos of leftists both committing crimes and being violently assaulted by the cops. That was a major source of interest for the right at that time, and there were a whole bunch of those independent journalists / solo video streamers who were really making bank off of that.
Yeah, so then Tracey rolls in, typical Michael Tracey style take of being like, it's almost the same thing he did to Maxine Waters, where it's like, Kamala Harris isn't really speaking too harshly about them, but wasn't she a prosecutor? What's up with that? Huh? What's up, Doc? Anyway, he's doing more appearances on Fox News, talking about the 2020 campaign, makes a appearance on the Xanax coded podcast Red Scare.
Not just coded, my man.
Benzo Blackout, Red Scare podcast.
That's hot.
It's one of our best premium episodes, is the Benzo Blackout on Thanksgiving one.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Go back in the archives for that one, guys.
We'll do something similar in the holidays this year.
Being a bulimic is praxis.
I don't think they care about praxis anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, no, they don't. They really don't.
They don't give it. When they went shotguns with Alex Jones, it was over at that point. Anyway, he keeps going after the election. Tracey's repeating the hits from the 2016 cycle, because the framing around the 2020 election for folks who remember was this is the most important election of our lifetime. Democracy's on the ballot. Trump's a tyrant. He's crazy. We gotta get him out and just get sanity back. No. And Tracey has some issues with that, of course. Mike, you found some certified bangers from Michael Tracey after the 2020 election.
Yeah, so he watched what happened, and he did not really have his finger on the pulse of where this was going, in my opinion. So on November 10th, he posted, "I was told we were getting a civil war, and all we got were a few scattered Stop the Steal rallies with a couple of dozen people that fizzled out in a matter of days."
It did not fizzle out.
So you remember...
y'all remember that crazy shit that happened at the U.S. Capitol building?
Yeah, that didn't. Says the prediction didn't go so well. So, you may recall our beautiful president made a beautiful phone call
perfect
I know he's
one,
made more than
actually.
one, but this was to Brad Raffensperger to try to get, what was it, 11,000 something more votes. So I'm just
Yeah, can you just find me some votes? Come on.
find me some votes.
I know you got them in there. Just look in the closet. Maybe they're in there.
It's like I'm tripping.
I really feel a need. Yeah, this one speaks to me. Here he is discussing the transcript from the Raffensperger phone call. Think about the hyperventilation over a rambling, nonsensical phone call that won't amount to anything of consequence as Trump outrage addicts relapsing and going back for another collective hit from the Trump alarmism crack pipe.
And he's starting to make it. I want to be like more of a resistance lib reading this. I'm just like, you know what I mean? Just cracked out on Trump. Trump rage. I love it.
In his soul, there is a Sebastian Gorka just dying to get out. I mean, there's something about the way he writes that is incredibly.
Oh yeah. Like it's
like Dragon of Budapest coded to me.
It's Batman villain coded word choices. But on January 6th itself, he was taking a look at how things were going, and he wrote, 2 months of obsessive stop-the-steal fantasizing has now had the practical impact of 1, losing the GOP the Senate, and 2, laundering history's dumbest mob intrusion, which accomplished nothing other than making everyone associated with the movement, in quotes, look like total lunatic. I don't really know where is the rage there that the mob riot didn't accomplish more.
I think he's just making fun of the Capitol rioters here.
Yeah, I think that's probably what he's saying.
But he's also got a word for the media. You can say, quote, this was a significant event without saying, quote, this was a literal coup attempt.
This was a literal coup attempt. It was.
But hysterics and drama queens are not especially clear thinkers under such circumstances.
He knows. The thing is, I'm fucking stupid. This is Michael. If you're listening to this, just listen up, buddy.
He is listening to this. I promise you.
I'm stupid. You're smarter than me. I don't know what's going on. That's it. I fooled. You got it. Like, I just want to say, I'm one of the idiots. So. I find the Raffensperger phone call thing to be so strange. Like if you're trying to be an objective journalist and whatever, I mean, under what circumstances is that call not extraordinarily shocking? The audacity of the phone call is I think it's pretty easy to understand why the liberal media.
Look, on the one hand, he can't write the plain truth, which was the phone call is a recording of a mob boss leaning on someone who they perceive as an underling. That's the simple truth of it. And you can write it in as hysterical a tone as you like, but it doesn't change that underlying reality. Michael is so consumed with resentment towards the people writing it that he has to contort himself into this almost, like I said, Gorka-like figure, just plummily railing against the people who are mad instead of dealing with the hard-boiled reality that's staring him in the face. And so he ends up, his only way to get attention for this is to say something utterly farcical. He knows he can't, the 1,000th op-ed or pissed off tweet saying that Trump is trying to, in fact, steal an election won't cause anyone to pay attention to Michael Tracey. This will. And the proof is that we're still paying attention to it now, 6 years later. So in that respect, he's doing exactly what he should do.
So in 2021, Michael Tracey joined Substack, where he still is today. This line stood out to me from his About page. Some may call the political orientation contrarian, but if you don't find yourself feeling contrary to the force-fed impositions of the new hegemonic media culture,
this is very cringe.
Maybe you're the one who should reevaluate. You dope.
Oh, Oh my God. No. No.
You
It
dope
doesn't-
is actually the best sentence that Michael
This is
Tracy's
like
ever
I'm saying,
written.
like it's just like what is he
There
like
you
what is the
go.
dialogue he's having with people? It's like, yeah, okay, you got it. Like I'm an idiot. It's like every pose is like he's smart, you're an idiot, only he knows. It's a really bizarre way to live.
And if there's any consensus on something, especially from people left of center, he is knee-jerk against it. He will. If a liberal started saying the sky is blue, he would say, well, actually, and start, plummily opining on that. It really is. Michael, you are a knee-jerk contrarian. And I know it makes you feel better to be angry at all the people who are calling you that, or angry at maybe the inartful ways that people are saying these things. But by God, that's what you are. You are it is a pure contrarian troll. There's nothing else there.
On the same Substack about page, Michael Tracey, he must have written this in 2021 and never updated page, but he teased an upcoming book about, quote, how the collective psyche of American political and media elites was warped by a seismic epistemic rupture during the era of Donald Trump, and that book would be published in 2022 by HarperCollins. That's a big publishing house.
Yeah.
I found an ISBN number for a book called Hysteria. It was never released. I don't know what happened to this book. He has.
If he got an advance for it, then wouldn't he have to pay it back if it wasn't published?
I don't know how that works.
I don't know how it works.
So he's doing Substack. He's not getting a ton of subscribers. All of his content on there is free. It's not paywalled. A paid subscription is optional on his account. But in some of his tweets, biting back at critics, Jason Wilson at The Guardian being one of them that he said this to, the other one being Bobby Silverman, who I texted, sent this to.
Oh, really?
I had no memory of this at all, and the tweet was deleted.
He must have said something about like how he needs to get a job or get a real job or something. And Michael Tracey repeatedly described having a, quote, full-time Substack position. I don't know what that means.
Mike, you looked into this question of his Substack.
Yeah, I did. I do remember that there were certain people who got didn't they get like kind of contracts on
They got
Substack?
a bonus, yeah.
It was like a fellowship thing. They would basically like advance you the money.
So I don't know if he got that, but like that could be one explanation for it. Madeline Peltz and I looked to, tried to scrutinize how much, relative to subscribers, how many of them would be likely to be paid or not. It does not seem like it would be much more than on Substack. Like, I don't want to give a complete wrong guess. So I don't want to say, but not enough to sustain a full life.
Yeah, he has a Patreon too. That shows he makes, I want to say something like mid $500 a month from that too. So yeah, it's not clear that this is a real money-making operation for Michael Tracey.
It could be that he has it could be somebody's invested in him, privately, or whatever, wants to be like a whale donor for his Substack or something like that. I don't know. It could be a number of things, but Substack is very, very difficult. It's very difficult for people who decide, oh, I want to try to make money off of this or whatever. It is not a place where it's very easy to go and make money. So it's understandable that it would be challenging for him.
So in 2021, he writes a story for the New York Post criticizing AOC, supposedly stifling dissent among her critics. But I want to kick forward the timeline a bit to Michael Tracey's trip to a college in Connecticut. At Connecticut College, there had been a spike in COVID cases. The campus asked the students to wear masks. They did a temporary quarantine, asked their students to socially distance. News media started taking interest in the outbreak, and where news media goes, Michael Tracey does follow. He blasted the school staff as tyrannical, and he got temporarily obsessed with what was happening on this college campus in its lockdown. He announced He was planning a talk at the college. September 13th, 4 p.m. "We'll see what happens," he wrote. And here's what happened. Michael Tracey showed up and was escorted away by campus security. Aggregating a student paper here. He marched with a small group of students out of the gates of the school, declaring, "I'm the Pied Piper, the revolutionary hero of Connecticut College."
No. Run that back and say it again. Run it back and say it again.
That's what it says in this school paper, the school paper story I found.
Run it back and say it again.
"I'm the Pied Piper, the revolutionary hero of Connecticut College."
Oh man.
If you'd like to take, I highly recommend watching any of the videos of this. His shirt is untucked.
We haven't really described her persona, but I think one accurate journalistic term that comes to mind is disheveled.
Yes.
He's a very disheveled individual.
He's cultivating a sort of rumpled shirt chic, and he's sweating profusely, and he's got a sort of jute microphone strapped to his belt while he carries around this megaphone.
Oh, dude, it's not a jute microphone. Looking at it, I think it's a karaoke machine.
Okay, it might be that.
That fucking rocks, dude. I'm Tracey built again.
Just to be clear, no one asked Michael Tracey to sort of give a speech. He just, why do you think campus security escorted him off? Because a guy in his early 30s showed up with a megaphone and is yelling at students. What did you think was going to happen, man?
Yeah, according to this article I found, he managed to attract a small crowd, but the crowd didn't really include fans of his. It was college kids who were arguing with him. And I guess passerbys who were driving, through by the scene threw eggs at him at some point, possibly on 2 occasions threw eggs at him. Here's a clip of here's a clip. It's this is an audio podcast. We'll just take you to the scene here.
What I was about to say is, the main reason, just to reiterate, the main reason I'm here is not because I have any particular interest in what goes on at a small liberal arts college in Connecticut that I've never been to. It's because I've gotten so many, dozens of messages, phone calls, texts from people who have strong criticisms of the policy they roll.
I don't know, but the honking was so fucking good.
It's just to be clear, I'm not here because I give a shit about this. I'm here because people were sending me links to this shit.
And I love what I love about that is that's journalism. That's what I like about it.
So a week later, the university loosened its COVID policy. They had done their quarantine. They started to, kind of let the kids roam around, hang out again. Michael Tracey declares victory. He believes it was his appearance at Connecticut College and the scrutiny that he brought upon the campus that caused them to change course. He sets his sights on other universities, does not have the same, I guess, success, quote unquote.
So in 2022, he becomes a prominent Twitter voice opposing U.S. policy towards Russia, towards the Russia-Ukraine war, in the same soup there with figures like Matt Taibbi. He's continuing to get cozy with Glenn Greenwald and starts to collaborate with him on Glenn's new Rumble shows and things like that.
So that relationship got even cozier in 2024. From July 26th to August 1st, Michael Tracey flew down to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where Glenn lives, and was hosting episodes of his podcast System Update out of his home studio while Glenn was away on vacation. On one episode that stood out to us, he hosted Nick Fuentes to talk about Trump and Israel, and then Dasha from Red Scare to talk about Kamala Harris and Brad Summer or something. Bob, you actually watched that. What was your review?
I watched the Fuentes one, and it's kind of an amazing clip. First of all, Michael got himself dressed up for this and actually, put on a tie and combed his hair. And somehow the effect is worse. He looks like he sat next to Stephen Root in the movie Office Space. Like he had the desk next to Milton's in that is the general vibe, I would say. Like utterly immiserated, low-level office drone is the vibe he's getting off. But more than his appearance, he decides that he's going to really grill Nick. And he leads off the interview by saying, I'd like to introduce our guest. He sort of defies descriptors. Here's Nick Fuentes. And I was like, there are a lot of ways you could introduce Nick Fuentes in the summer of 2024. Here is America's best-known white nationalist. Here is a man who briefly worked on Kanye West's fascism-ridden campaign. Here is a pretty open anti-Semite and a rank misogynist. Here is someone who wants to engage in ethnic cleansing and thinks that the women in Gilead were really let off the hook. That's who Nick Fuentes is. It's not hard to describe him, but for Michael, this is all one big mystery. What Michael's main thrust of his questioning in this episode is, well, you are a prominent Trump supporter, Nick Fuentes. How can you support him when he invites all of these Christian nationalists and devout Zionists to the White House, all of whom are fanatical supporters of the state of Israel for dominionist reasons? Doesn't that run counter to your entire support of Trump? For some reason, the words anti-Semitism never seem to come out of Michael's mouth during this. And
yeah, I just want to
I
want to inform this more, which is, Fuentes actually arrived not as a supporter of Trump, but as a critic of Trump.
Yeah.
And that's what he was drilling into, which was basically like, you criticize Trump, but you were a supporter of his for the Stop the Steal movement when he was doing these things with Israel.
Yeah, it's this weird attempt at a gotcha question, like why aren't you maintaining ideological consistency?
Well, he's like, why aren't you more based? Is basically what he's saying. He's like, why aren't you more based?
And
why aren't you more keck?
If his goal was to make Nick Fuentes look like a sane and reasonable person, I don't know how he would have conducted the interview any differently. He was not intending to give Nick Fuentes a tongue bath, but that was the end product. That was on Glenn Greenwald's show. Nick Fuentes comes across looking like an utterly reasonable critic of Trump and Trump supporter. So it is in fact the worst thing that you can do with Nick Fuentes. First of all, don't interview Nick Fuentes because he's a liar, and nothing he says can be believed. There's no point in doing it when, you can debate the merits of platforming someone or not platforming someone. But honestly, it's not even worth it to say, Nick Fuentes, you are a Nazi, because everybody knows that going in. But Michael doesn't even manage to do that because he's a pure contrarian. He can't just say, like, why do you express such hatred for women? Why are you, in fact, terrified of women? Why do you hate Jews so much? Because those are dumb questions to ask, too. He has to come at from this odd angle of insisting that Nick Fuentes, like I said, be more based. And the result is, honestly, the best thing that could have happened to Nick Fuentes.
I also want to point out Michael Tracey went to the Republican National Convention for Glenn and interviewed Republicans on the floor there. Nothing super crazy.
Yeah, and then in 2025, he stumbled into, I think, the thread. I don't think he does. He doesn't have any stories that are his own, right? So it's not like oh, well, this is a Michael Tracey scoop or a story. That's not really a thing.
It's columns, which are fine. Columns are fine. I've written plenty of columns, but
he found a lane on the website that he could hit over and over. They could literally button mash on. And it was the Epstein saga. He started to really get into it in 2025 as liberal media became more and more fixated on it as a potential landmine for Trump.
I also would like to note at this point that the Epstein story really is the perfect Michael Tracey story, because in this instance, it's one of the rare subjects in American politics that, for very different reasons, a vast majority agree that that these were horrific crimes, and that it speaks to a greater there is a larger political narrative to be explored as to why he was able to get away for so long. The right and the left disagree vehemently about what actually that greater underlying political story might be, but I think everyone's on the same side. So if you would like to say stand out or make a name for yourself or get invited to go talk on Piers Morgan, there's really, for a pure contrarian, there's only one possible take that one could have. And that take is, actually, everyone else is wrong. They're in the throes of a moral panic. They're being hysterical once again. And the Epstein story, while there were crimes, is a nothing burger. And that everyone is ignoring the really important stuff, which Michael Tracey never deigns to actually go and report on.
I want to point out that, Michael Tracey is not arguing that, Epstein did nothing wrong, right? But he argues that the extent of what he did, or the story that is told about Jeffrey Epstein, that he was running this massive sex trafficking blackmail operation, whatever, is not corroborated with information that he finds credible. And this is an Alan Dershowitz argument, right? This is Alan Dershowitz's argument about Epstein, which is we're not saying he did nothing wrong. I mean, he took a guilty plea. He admitted he did wrong things. We're just saying that people have taken that and run with it in a way that's really gotten out of control.
Yeah, if there's anyone making an argument that's close to Tracey's on a more consistent basis, it's Alan Dershowitz.
Including arguments about, how strictly one should adhere to the age of consent laws. Michael Tracey does spend a lot of time, like Dershowitz, saying, well, there are parts of America where it's not illegal to have sexual relations with a 16-year-old. So, the fact that he did it in one state and not the other is kind of arbitrary when you really think about it.
When I'm the president, if you type age of consent into Google, the cops show up at your house. Anyway, yeah, so he wrote a handful of pieces explaining his theory. The sort of one that got the most traction, he published in Compact magazine in July, called The Idiocy of the Epstein Mythology. This got him a lot of attention, particularly from right-wing media outlets, commentators and stuff, who had an incentive to try to undermine all this negative sentiment that was building towards Trump and his administration for promising and then backing out of their promises to release the Epstein files and their motivations for potentially doing so. He's doing hits on Ben Shapiro's thing. He writes for the Free Press or goes on their podcast. Richard Hanania, I think I actually said that right this time. He's always doing shit with him.
Another quintessential website personality.
He even gets booked on Piers Morgan and has, kind of a memorable exchange there.
I'm hearing a lot of conspiracy theories, but they're all coming out of your mouth. Let me give the final word to Tara because he
what
keeps...
conspiracy theory did I postulate?
When he's not lecturing me about my interview skills, he's lecturing you about your journalistic skills. So your response to that and to what David Boies had to say.
Please, Tara, go ahead, defend it.
I don't know, Michael. Have you ever actually listened to any of the tapes at the Palm Beach, the police in Palm Beach, the detective? Have you listened to any of the girls that they interviewed that were as young as 14? I've listened to them all. Yeah, and you think that they're not credible? I've listened to it all, Tara. You don't think that entire pyramid scheme in a high school?
Do you think Virginia Roberts-Giuffre is credible? She had nothing to do with that initial Palm Beach investigation. We're talking about your former journalistic collaborator who had to recant allegations against Dershowitz, had to recant her allegations against
let her speak, please.
A Harvard professor, Stephen Koslin, recanted against Jean-Luc Brunel. So you defend the credibility
let her speak, or I'll cut your mic.
Of your journalistic collaborator. Go ahead.
Who do you work for, Michael? Because I've never met anyone in my entire life who would who's paying you? Who do you work for? I think a lot of people are wondering this because I've never seen anyone quite like you going after victims of sex crimes and attacking them like this. So you must be being paid by someone in power who does not like these accusations that have been made against them. And I think it's fair to ask, are you being paid by any of the men who've been accused by Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm having trouble hearing right now. I wish I could respond to whatever.
So Tracey denies. I want to be clear. Tracey denies this is the case, but you can understand why that clip was everywhere.
Yeah, it's very funny. But look, Ms. Palmieri may have phrased it inartfully and kind of hinted at something darker that she didn't have any facts to back it up with. But I also wonder who is paying Michael Tracey, because all the evidence that we've seen does not suggest that this enterprise of his is financially lucrative.
Well, journalism is a tough business in general.
Yeah,
right?
but you've covered shitheads who've managed to figure out how to get in on the gravy train.
Yes.
And
Jack Posobiec has a fucking movie theater in his house.
We keep bringing it up. He's got a home theater.
Yeah, like Tim Pool has a skate park built in the basement of his compound. That is just one of multiple properties he owns.
Yeah, but he's also never experienced not even a whisper of joy. Like he's so miserable that he can have 12 skate parks and I would feel nothing.
I do want to hone in on this. Like, the reason to be a contrarian dingus and to pick out this particular lane is because there is a way to monetize it. They're absolutely that's doable. And whether it's latching on to the right batch of Substack subscribers, which is very difficult, or finding one sugar daddy who's willing to, pay your full freight. Like, there are very clear ways for an apostate, leftist branded person to make bank. But by all accounts, the reason Tara Palmieri asked that question is because, how do you pay for food, man? Because it's not clear to me. Maybe there's family money that he's coasting off of, which honestly, there are a lot of people in journalism who rely on a certain, sized bank account in their family to be able to do what they do. And there's honestly not anything necessarily wrong with that. But is he just doing it for love of the game? That's the question that I have.
Even though he denies, it's none of Epstein's buddies are have me on payroll. I think that's the kind of question that comes up when you see a person, a guy like Michael Tracey, where it's like, okay, well, maybe you think some people have taken the Epstein thing too far, or the story that is understood by the public does not necessarily match the facts, or you have questions about the process or the accusation specifically. Whatever, man, that's your opinion. That's fine. But to be like, I'm going to go on TV and yell at people about it.
I'm going to go on TV and immiserate and basically call all the victims liars. I'm
going to go to a press conference on Capitol Hill, that was mentioned in that clip we played at the top of the episode. That is where, Epstein survivors are speaking, and then hit somebody with this long-winded question being like, well, one of the accusers is a fucking liar. What about that? It's like,
or I'm going to go and start harassing Julie Brown, a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter who, if you want to point to one person who cracked the Epstein case, it's her. And to confront her at some event and basically, badger her to the point that Jim Acosta has to step in and be like, back off, buddy. And we can debate the merits of Jim Acosta another time. But, and to the point where you're then challenging people to a fist fight outside the hotel and screaming at random women on Twitter and challenging them to a fight. I want to be clear something. We're rolling our eyes at this guy, and we're getting, annoyed by his god-awful prose and smug, self-important tone. But the thing that he's doing here, it's reprehensible. There's no doubt about that. It's absolutely vile.
I think last thing we've got on the docket here is he briefly was doing a podcast with Matt Taibbi, but that show was short-lived. You found this clip, Mike, from Today's News. Great podcast title.
Just mailing it in. The anti-woke demographic, they'll fucking take anything, man. They'll eat like a fucking tin can. They're like goats.
So this was April 24th, 2026. They're talking about something you know a lot about, Mike, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Release was very odd. What they talked about their new values of truth, justice, equity, and inclusion, and said when one of our own fails to meet those standards, no matter his or her role in the organization, we take it seriously and must take appropriate action.
You know what that means, right? That there was like one of these many institutional coups that took place across the NGO and media worlds. Around this time. Oddly, this was pre-George Floyd, so I don't know, maybe it was like a precursor.
But this was already happening, yeah.
Yeah, it was already happening, but, this kind of stuff, like, just rocketed across the entire spectrum, like, in connection to George Floyd, but this was sort of like a little bit of a forerunner or a preview of it. But it was essentially like a racial coup, it seems, like, where, like, no longer could this organization be headed by this older white guy, so it's just like a bundle of very
really
vague
funny,
suggestions that he had done something bad in terms of his personnel management, which maybe he did. I don't know.
But, maybe.
Maybe he fucking did, dog.
Yeah,
maybe he
fucking
did
something.
A racial coup inside the Southern Poverty Law Center.
You ever hear when like Ilhan Omar said about 9/11, some people did something? It's my favorite thing to like randomly bring up is some people some people did something. So it's like, maybe some people did something, but it was nothing. So it's very funny, the stuff he says there, because he sees the circumstances of it and is like, and feels, and this is how you know he's not a journalist and that he's at best a pundit, is he has some basic information about the timing and decides like, yes, this is one of these woke things where, these young people with changing demographics, rise up to get rid of their white boss that were happening across the country. That it's like, no, Morris Dees had legitimate allegations against him. And the reason why you only hear, the sort of like he's been pushed out and that sort of thing, this, that, and the other thing is because many of the people who sued were bound by NDAs.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have all that's actually what happened. You don't have the sexual like harassment, whatever, inappropriate behavior and the sort of racial stuff that happened. That's all stuck there because these allegations came forward. These people took legal action against SPLC and they were bound by an NDA. And the reason why I know all that is because, as you know, I was not bound by an NDA. And the reason I wasn't is because the union fought to get rid of those NDAs because no one really understood what happened around Morris Dees. So I happen to have that information firsthand. And it just shows, it's just like the way he's just like, yeah, it's definitely this. It's definitely this. This is like part of this woke thing where there are people are rising up all around the country and stuff like that. And it's like,
and maybe it's not, but like it definitely is.
Yeah, maybe it's not, but it definitely. And what's interesting is, I will allow that, like, maybe there's a small percentage of that in the sense that, like, all organizations change, right, over time, that, politics change, expectations are different. The way that SPLC existed in the 1970s, for example, versus how the standards you would expect from an organization, a progressive organization years later, that type of thing may have been a small factor. But he doesn't know anything about what Morris Dees was accused of. He doesn't know his reputation inside the organization, doesn't understand the anger of the workforce and where it came from. It was not a woke thing or anything like that necessarily.
And he doesn't care to know either.
No, it's easier to sit there with Matt Taibbi and smugly dismiss the idea that there were like legitimate allegations because the SPLC is part of the elite liberal media now in their minds. And so therefore they're woke hysterics, every man jack of them. And that's where they make their bread and butter, by sort of being loudly and confidently wrong and being too dumb and incurious to actually go figure out what's going on before they open their mouth.
Before we play the next clip, Jared, which I believe is Owen Higgins again speaking about his interaction with Michael in Vancouver, I just want to point out here that Michael Tracey, who has overlap with both Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi, is like part of that whole like free speech branding, which is so important for the sort of center right kind of free press, these type of things, et cetera, has not made a lot of concerned noise about what has befallen the SPLC.
Yeah. You may wonder, you think, damn, this guy spends a lot of time online, but what's he like in real life? Here's Owen Higgins.
Yeah, so this is the Web Summit conference. This is a series of different like tech, politics, society conferences that are held around the world. This one was in Vancouver, British Columbia. They have one in Lisbon. They have one, I think, in Qatar, Hong Kong. They have them like all over the place. Not in the U.S., but other places. It's run by Paddy Cosgrave, who is this Irish tech guy. Everybody in basically who like runs it is Irish. They're all like from the part of Ireland that my mom is from. We were having real Irish hours for sure on a number of days and nights there. But yeah, so I got approached by them I think like last fall, and they wanted me to come out to do the Vancouver one, and I was like, yeah, sure. They were like, well, we'll pair you up with some people, and like, we have a couple of ideas for you to do some like tech politics talks. So I ended up getting paired up with, and all this context is important to talking about Michael, right? So I got paired up on one of them with Libby Liu, and she's the CEO of Whistleblower Aid. They're like a really great organization based out of, I think, DC. They work with whistleblowers. This guy Ryan Shank, who exposed like some of this ICE training stuff, is like one of the guys with them. So she and I were paired together, and then we were also connected together to do this talk, like this Night Summit talk, right? So like Night Summit was supposed to be it's like off the record, which just basically means it's not being recorded by like Web Summit itself. People can record it all they want. It doesn't matter. You can talk about it. And it was going to be me and her versus Michael Tracey and Brett Weinstein. This debate over like tech bros, are we the bad guys? Talking about like the right wing tilt of the tech sector. And so over the course, I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but Brett got knocked off, and Christian Small, as the labor leader, got added on. And it was kind of no longer like really a debate. It was just supposed to be like a panel forum. Now, the night before, it was Stephen Walt, Ryan Grimm, and Aaron Mate, moderated by Cenk Uygur, talking about the year so far, 2026. But, it starts at 9, and like a lot of the people are drunk, and like, it's rowdy in there. I was there. I wasn't like, I was like kind of hanging out with some people, but I wasn't like, really paying a whole bunch of attention. And so two things happened. So one, I saw Michael in the front row. I'd never met him before in my life, but I know what he looks like. And I was like, oh, there he is. And he was sitting with this blonde who turned out to be Lauren Southern, who was another person who was invited. And they were hanging out like pretty much the whole conference. So anyway, but I met Michael there, and I was like, look, like we're going to be on this panel tomorrow. Like, I'm sure that we'll have some disagreements. Let's just, make sure we give people, like, entertain people, like whatever. I didn't anticipate having any specific disagreements. I just knew that I would be on stage with him, and he'll find something to be. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there was just no question that was what was going to happen. So I was just like, I'm prepared for it. I'm going to like, I'm going to make contact with him now. Hopefully make it so that he understands that like, I'm aware of what he's doing, and like, and I kind of want to gauge where he's at too, because remember, he had just kind of been fired by Matt Taibbi for his podcast at this point, and Matt had just lost his lawsuit against me. So it was kind of like, I wanted to kind of feel him out a little bit to see if like, maybe I could get some info on Matt. I didn't, but. So the next day, I think I ran into him once or twice, but it was just like in the speaker's area, like, and he was just hanging out with Lauren Southern like the whole time. And I think that was kind of like the first thing where I was like, okay, like I don't really actually want to be even superficially friendly with this guy. If this is who he's hanging out with, like, I'm like, and then I started like looking at his timeline, and I was seeing like all the shit that he had said about like Epstein victims and stuff. And I was like starting to get a really bad taste in my mouth. So then I went to dinner with Chris Smalls, who I was going to be on stage with later, and Stephen Walt and Chris Hedges, and one of the organizers. And that was when I found out. So this was like at like 6. And I found out that like at 5, Hedges was like walking out of the speakers lounge with Walt and the guy that was like the organizer. And Michael just like walked up to him and started yelling him about like all the stuff he had said about Epstein and like just haranguing him and like chasing him down the hallway. So we were at dinner, we were just like, holy shit, like that's crazy. And then we told Chris like all about who Michael was. And so he was well prepped for it. We got on stage that evening, like Michael was trying to be friendly with me, which was fine. But also then he was like talking about how he was talking shit to Chris Hedges and then Hedges was there. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go like talk to Hedges in a very pointed thing to like, be very clear about whose side I come down on this. And then during the conversation, like first like half hour was probably like me and Michael going back and forth because the other two weren't talking. Then the moderator asked us both to shut up basically and let the other two talk, which I was fine with. I didn't, whatever. And then I didn't say anything for like another like 25 minutes until like at the very end. So at the very beginning, Michael tried to talk about Epstein and I just kind of talked over him. That's how me and him just kind of started bouncing back and forth because I just didn't want to like hear it. And he was reading off of his phone and then he was asked to do his final comments and he started reading the same thing off of his phone. And I just fucking like was just like, shut up. No one wants to hear this. I was like, look, people in the audience were like yelling at you. Like, cause this is what was happening. So people in the audience were like yelling at you, like just stop. And I was like, nobody cares about this. And I kind of like brushed them off. And then I started talking. He was like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And he was like throwing his hand in my face and stuff like that. It was just very like immature on both of our parts, honestly. So that was like my onstage. But then after that, like, I encountered him a couple times and, he was like, I wouldn't say he was like ingratiating toward me, but he was like trying to be quite friendly. But my feeling on that was I just like, I just don't really like feel it, man. Like, I try to be friendly to people who aren't, just outright like white supremacists or Nazis or some shit. But like, I just never felt like comfortable around him or like I could like trust anything around him. And he was also hanging out with Lauren Southern. While I was walking around, I felt myself kind of like starting to feel a little bit sorry for him, kind of like, because I was like, man, like it must suck to like, because everyone's telling him that he's like being a heel and being an asshole, basically. Like, like throughout the conference. And I was just like, man, this like kind of sucks for him. Like, I don't know. But then I was like walking around, like at the end, I saw him like sitting like on a couch, like hanging out with like Curtis Yarvin. And I was like, all right, man, like whatever.
I was surprised to hear that Michael Tracey was kicking it with Lauren Southern. And
I was not.
Sky knows ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel satiated.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, well, we are out of stuff. So that means it's time to end this episode like we end all of our Who the Hell episodes. By returning to the question that got us started more than 2 hours ago.
Oh, God.
I will start with our guest, Bobby Silverman, who has been so gracious with his time to join us on this journey. Bob, who the hell is Michael Tracey?
I did some time outside of the research to sit with my thoughts and think, why is it that I find myself so often, and why I have been during the course of this episode, so enraged by Michael Tracey, beyond the fact that he's a contrarian troll and that's what they want to do to you. And I think it's because, if I'm being really honest, there's part of me that identifies with him. Because Michael Tracey is one of these people who saw what was happening at Occupy and had the idea that they too could report the news, that they could do investigative work. Even though in, 2011, the paths to doing that from just being a guy who posts on Twitter or a guy who writes blogs, like self-published blogs late at night, was still not exactly clear, but the door got open. And you could do that if you put in the work. But It's because so many of the time the things that Michael says are not exactly wrong. Like we've mentioned it time and time again. There are fair critiques embedded in every single Michael Tracey take. But the way that it sort of curdles and becomes entirely built around a kind of personal resentment is where things go horribly, horribly wrong. While I don't personally think that I ever would go down that path, there is certainly a very narrow there but for the grace of God go I timeline, where if my own journalistic ambitions were stunted and I didn't start actually just figuring out brick by brick how to do real reporting, I could have very easily have ended up in the same place. Or not very easily, but let's just say there is a reasonable, there are the rare timelines where I end up in that same place as him, just sort of seething with resentment against people who I'm jealous of for one reason or another. And so I build my entire identity around hating people whose tweets I don't like. More to the point is that we built, consciously or not, the kind of media apparatus that can, as we've said, reward people for pure contrarianism. That in a better functioning media ecosystem, these desires to speak truth to power, which I believe are genuine in him, and these desires to take people to task for hypocrisies and compromising principles, could have been funneled into actually productive journalistic work. But the easier path is just being an asshole. And in a lot of ways, the more profitable path is being an attention-seeking asshole. And, it's the Mike Cernovich line, which I'll credit him for because he's right on this one. Conflict is attention and attention is influence. And Michael has, even though he hasn't vaulted to any great heights, and as far as we can tell, it hasn't made him rich, he has adhered to that axiom throughout his entire punditry internet personality career. And it's really kind of sad because in a better, more healthy, more equitable world, he wouldn't have had to do that. And whether he could have succeeded or not, who the hell knows? But at least would have been a viable option. And the fact that there is no room, that all of these people who may want to do good things are cut off from the possibility of really doing that, that makes me sad as well. And I really do feel bad for him because there's really no way back at this point. He's the guy who said that that an 80-year-old woman assaulted him. He's the guy who runs around calling Epstein victim liars. That's who he is now. And there's really no turning back.
We posed the same question to Owen Higgins. Here's what he said.
Sometimes I find that Michael is somewhat directionally correct, and I feel like he is saying something that is at least interesting, or like there's a world where his talents, such as they are, could be turned to good. But that's not the world that he wants to live in. He wants to live in the world where he pisses people off and annoys them. And you can do that online. You can be a heel to get a following, whatever. But I don't think that lasts forever. And I think that he is kind of stuck right now in not really he doesn't really do any reporting. He doesn't really have anything to say that's not like trolling or contrarian pushback or something like that. So it is kind of like an example of wasted potential where he could be doing something interesting, but he's simply choosing not to.
Jared, I think it's time we hear from you. Who the hell is Michael Tracey?
I mean, I think what Bob and Owen said, I vibe with, right? But I also want to just kind of address something I think we may have talked around. But to me, a big part of Michael Tracey's story is that he is so attention seeking. And that has kind of allowed him in the back half of his career to be sort of a useful idiot for conservative media. He is like conservative media's favorite liberal reporter, which is how they categorize him. It's like He seems blissfully unaware, or maybe simply just does not care, that the reason Ben Shapiro wants to talk to him, the reason Tucker Carlson wants to have him on the show, the reason any of these people find him interesting is because he is making a critique, ostensibly from a left position, that aligns with theirs or supports their own narratives, right? And he seems to think he's really doing it's like it's the meme where it's like, damn, I bet this goes so fucking hard if you're stupid. Like, are you dumb, dog? Like, you're getting used, man. He's just like renting himself out as like
he's a sock puppet. Basically.
Yeah, I mean he rents himself out to be like, arm candy for right wing pundits at this point. And so while what he's saying often has some grain of, a valid critique in it, I think the setting that he dispenses it into is also important for understanding Michael Tracey, because making those critiques in a left-wing subreddit or something, a lot of folks might not bat an eye. But you start going on podcasts with really far right and like diehard Trump God Emperor types, of course, people are going to start raising some eyebrows. Mike, from one Mike to another, who the hell is Michael Tracey?
Good question. I think of it kind of like Jesse Singal is like the Banana Republic anti-woke thing. And then like Tim Pool is like your Gap. And then Michael Tracey is like the Old Navy, right? Those are like he's sort of.
Aren't they all owned by the same company? Is that the metaphor we're going for?
That is the
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just flavors of anti-woke guys. Like he's like kind of like, he's the working class option. He's the Old Navy option. Yeah, I mean, to me, this story is only interesting to me, and it's the only reason. Well, people were talking about him relative to the Epstein stuff. He kept coming up. He came up with the Acosta stuff, so I felt like, let's definitely try to figure out who he is and let's talk about him because he keeps coming up. But I don't really think that this podcast, it's not helpful to even really think about him. It's mostly like what he represents to journalism, and I just feel like this is where we are at as the impact of social media on journalism. I really just think it's just manifest in this story. This is like the perfect symbol of that. He is a guy who, I mean, I don't know if I agree with Bob that he might find a lane doing stuff. It seems like his best talent, and he has, I can't find anything that really stands out even about his punditry to me other than taking a contrary position. It just seems like all his skills are about drawing attention to himself and button mashing on the site.
Which skill almost feels generous.
You just have to be pugnacious and just.
You have to be willing to humiliate yourself. You have to be willing to humiliate and debase yourself.
And I have behaved in ways that, are not super dignified online before. So it's not like I'm saying I'm above all these criticisms. That's why I think it's really a story about what the algorithm has done to the profession, where you are just waiting you can just wait over the site all the time, waiting to like snap out a banger that is going to get in the For You tab and flutter up there. I mean, Michael Tracey is the living embodiment of that problem. And, he will be replaced by others exactly like him. And there are already tons of people who are aspiring for that, where they just sit around and wait for the trending topics and try to snap one off that, they want to get a rhythm with the algorithm, get a rhythm with the media. And all of a sudden people were paying attention to Michael Tracey about Epstein. And what did he do? He stayed on that, pissing people off for like an entire year, drawing attention to himself. He's just riding the algorithm and the attention. So I just think that like that's who he is. And I don't think he's capable of anything else. He'll never produce something that is like where I'm like, oh, well, I learned something new.
Right. But he doesn't have to. I mean, that's sort of I agree, Mike. I think, and again, when I say like, it makes me sad, I think it is a bad thing that ritualized self-abasement is now some kind of career path. I mean, it's not as like physically taxing as what Clavicular does to himself, but it's the same genre. It's the same bit.
So there you have it. There's our episode. Over the last couple hours, you've listened to us go probably way too deep on a man that, if you encounter him online, I mean, people say all kinds of crazy stuff about him, right? He is a constant punchline on the website that he so beloves, Twitter/X. You're always seeing people commenting on his physical appearance, saying things like he smells like Band-Aids. But we hope that this episode kind of unpacked who he actually is a little bit more. That way, next time you see his little blue avatar cruising through your timeline, being a little bitch to some journalist you like, you know who the hell Michael Tracey actually is. See you next week.